The photograph slipped from Glenda's trembling fingers, a stark white rectangle fluttering down like a pronouncement of doom onto the polished marble floor of their Kensington penthouse. 3 years. 3 agonizingly long years of meticulously curated memories. Birthday parties celebrated with extravagant cakes and laughter. Christmas mornings awash in the glow of fairy lights and shared presents. Countless school plays and sun-drenched family vacations. All of it, a meticulously duplicated existence in a parallel universe she never knew existed. Until now. Brian's arm, unmistakable even blurred in the cheap print, wrapped possessively around another woman's waist. Beside them, 2 children, impossibly bright and joyful mirror images of the life Glenda had believed was exclusively hers, grinned wide next to a lavishly decorated Christmas tree in what was clearly another home. Another family, another complete and utter deception. The silence in their pristine, art-filled living room felt deafening, a vacuum pressing in around her, even as the distant hum of London's evening traffic drifted up faintly from 20 floors below. Her custom-designed wedding ring, a delicate band of platinum and diamonds, caught the last, defiant rays of sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows, scattering tiny, mocking rainbows across the scattered evidence of his betrayal. Bank statements, damning in their detail, travel receipts for trips she'd never known about, school enrollment forms bearing unfamiliar names, and worst of all, a mortgage for a charming Victorian house in Hampstead she'd never even seen. Her phone vibrated on the glass coffee table, startling her. A text from Brian. * working late again tonight, darling. Don't wait up. * the lie, so casually delivered, felt like molten acid in her throat, burning its way down. She knew exactly where he was now, tucking another set of children into bed, perhaps reading the very same bedtime stories he'd shared with Emma, playing the devoted husband and father role she believed belonged solely to her and their 10-year-old daughter. Glenda's hands moved with a chilling, mechanical precision. She scrolled through his contacts, past colleagues and clients, until she found it, the name that had appeared with unnerving frequency in his recent call logs. Vivian. Her finger hovered, a millimeter from the screen. In 38 years of a life she'd meticulously constructed, she had never once imagined herself in this position. A successful architect, a devoted wife, a loving mother now. She sat amidst the shattered ruins of everything she thought she knew about her existence. But as the initial shock began to crystallize, hardening into something sharper, colder, infinitely more dangerous, Glenda realized something that would change everything. She wasn't going to destroy herself over this betrayal. She was going to destroy him. London had always been Glenda's sanctuary, her crucible of ambition. From the moment she'd arrived 15 years ago, a young architect fresh from a small, suffocatingly familiar Scottish hometown, the city had embraced her ambitions with open, unapologetic arms. She had clawed her way up from junior designer to senior partner at Morrison & Associates, one of Europe's most prestigious architectural firms, creating breathtaking spaces that redefined how people lived and worked across 3 continents. Her penthouse overlooking Hyde Park, a minimalist masterpiece of glass and steel, stood as an undeniable testament to that hard-won success. Every clean line, every sensual curve, every meticulously chosen material, from the Italian marble to the reclaimed timber, reflected her unyielding aesthetic vision and professional triumph. The open-plan living space flowed seamlessly, a fluid design mirroring her own life's perceived ease. From the gourmet kitchen where she crafted elaborate Sunday brunches for Brian and Emma to the cozy sitting area where they'd spent countless evenings as what she believed was a perfectly content, impenetrable family unit. Brian had slipped into her life during her 5th year in London, a missing puzzle piece she hadn't even realized she needed until he filled the void. Charming, devastatingly successful, and possessor of a magnetic charisma, he was uncannily good at making her feel like the most extraordinary woman in any room, the singular focus of his universe. He'd pursued her with the kind of romantic intensity she'd only ever read about in wistful novels, appearing at her office with unexpected bouquets of rare orchids, whisking her away for spontaneous weekends in Paris, culminating in a moonlit proposal on a historic bridge in Prague, tears streaming down his face as he promised her forever. Their wedding, an affair of understated elegance, had been featured in glossy architectural magazines. A converted Georgian mansion, which Glenda herself had personally redesigned, became the backdrop for a predecessor ceremony that brought together London's creative elite. Brian had written his own vows, speaking about building a life together with the same precision and beauty Glenda brought to her buildings. She'd believed every single, carefully crafted word. The pregnancy, though unexpected, had been welcomed with boundless joy. Emma, a perfect, dimpled combination of Glenda's fierce determination and Brian's easy charm, arrived exactly 9 months after their idyllic honeymoon in Tuscany. Their life, meticulously planned and beautifully executed, fell into the kind of rhythm Glenda had designed for maximum happiness. Morning runs through the dew-kissed pathways of Hyde Park, spontaneous weekend trips to their charming country house in the Cotswolds, elaborate birthday celebrations that rivaled small festivals, and holidays in exotic destinations chosen specifically for creating lasting, sun-drenched family memories. Brian's financial consulting business flourished, mirroring Glenda's own skyrocketing architectural career. He traveled frequently, or so she thought, meeting high-profile clients across Europe and occasionally in New York. His success, he'd always assured her, meant Glenda could take on more creatively challenging projects, the kind of demanding commercial developments that won international awards and elevated her firm's reputation to legendary status. She'd never questioned his absences. Not once. Trust, absolute and unwavering, had been the bedrock of their relationship from day one. When Brian said he needed to be in Edinburgh for a week-long project, Glenda, immersed in her own demanding schedule, simply focused on her deadlines. When he mentioned taking on a long-term client in Manchester requiring monthly visits, she'd actually been grateful for the space, for the guilt-free evenings to work late into the night, lost in her designs. The brutal unveiling of his double life had come through the most mundane, prosaic circumstances imaginable. Their accountant, a notoriously fastidious man, had called about discrepancies in their joint tax filings. Specifically, a second mortgage Brian had apparently taken out without her knowledge or consent. Glenda had initially dismissed it as an error, some innocuous paperwork mix-up that occasionally occurred with their complex financial portfolio. But the mortgage was real, undeniably so, and the address, a perfectly ordinary street in Hampstead, was equally tangible. And when Glenda, her heart a cold, tight knot in her chest, had driven there that afternoon, abandoning her scheduled client presentation without a second thought, she'd found it. A charming, albeit generic, Victorian house with children's bikes scattered carelessly across the front garden. And through the sunlit windows, family photos that belonged to a life she'd never been invited to share. The private investigator she'd hired, a stoic man with world-weary eyes, delivered his findings with professional detachment, as if he were presenting architectural blueprints rather than the devastating evidence of her husband's systematic deception. Brian Morrison, her Brian, maintained 2 complete family units with chilling mathematical precision. Monday through Wednesday, he was the devoted husband and father in Kensington with Glenda and Emma. Thursday through Sunday, he transformed into the loving partner and dad in Hampstead with Vivian and their twins, Marcus and Sophie, aged 8 and 6 respectively. The investigator's report read like a schedule designed by a logistics expert of the highest caliber. School events, parent-teacher conferences, elaborate family vacations, routine medical appointments, all duplicated with different women, different children, different versions of the same man who'd convinced each family they were his entire singular world. Sitting in her perfectly designed living room, now a sterile stage for this shattering drama, surrounded by the undeniable evidence of Brian's double life, Glenda felt something she'd never experienced before. Not just the soul-crushing weight of betrayal, but a deep, burning, visceral rage at her own blindness. How could she, a woman whose entire career was built on seeing structures others missed, on identifying the hidden stresses and critical junctures, have missed 3 years of this elaborate, flawlessly executed deception? How had she failed to notice the gaps, the subtle inconsistencies, the moments when Brian's attention seemed divided by something she couldn't quite identify, an invisible pull towards another life? Emma was at her best friend's house for the weekend, blissfully unaware that her father was, at this very moment, tucking other children into bed with the same comforting bedtime stories he'd shared with her for the past 10 years. Glenda was profoundly grateful for this temporary solitude, this sacred space to process the true magnitude of Brian's betrayal without having to navigate her daughter's inevitable confusion and searing pain. Her phone buzzed again, vibrating insistently on the marble table. Brian's name appeared on the screen, accompanied by a photo from their last family vacation to Barcelona. All three of them laughing, genuinely, on the sun-drenched steps of the Sagrada Familia. Emma perched proudly on Brian's shoulders, Glenda's arm wrapped around his waist with complete trust and absolute, unburdened love. "Hello, darling." Brian's voice, a familiar comfort for so long, carried its usual warmth, the very tone that had once made her feel like the most cherished woman in the world. "Just wanted to check in before dinner. How was your day?" Glenda closed her eyes, taking a steadying breath, testing her ability to maintain a normal, composed conversation while sitting amidst the wreckage of their entire marriage. "Fine," she managed, her voice a cool, practiced mask. "The Morrison project is moving forward smoothly." "Excellent. I should be home by 10 tonight. This client meeting is running longer than expected." The lie felt like a toxic poison seeping into her ear, venomous and suffocating. She knew exactly where he was, could almost see him. Probably helping Vivian clear the dinner table, patiently reviewing homework with children who called him daddy. Discussing weekend plans with a woman who, just like her, believed she was his only wife. "Drive safely," Glenda managed, her voice impossibly steady despite the chaotic storm raging in her chest. "Always do. Love you." The words, once a source of unwavering security, now felt like carefully aimed weapons. "Love you too," she replied, the lie tasting like ash. She ended the call and stared, unblinking, at Vivian's number in Brian's contact list. The other woman, the unwitting partner in this elaborate deception, another victim of Brian's masterful compartmentalization, probably sitting in her Hampstead kitchen right now, believing herself to be the center of his universe, while Glenda, 15 miles away, occupied the exact same equally deceived role. For 38 years, Glenda had approached problems with the cool, incisive logic of an architect. She had solved them through careful analysis, strategic planning, and an uncanny ability to visualize solutions that others missed. She'd built her entire career by seeing structures, both physical and conceptual, that others overlooked, by understanding how disparate elements could be meticulously woven together to create something extraordinary and enduring. Now, she was going to use those very same skills, that same ruthless intellect, to dismantle the most complex, insidious structure Brian had ever created. The intricately balanced, meticulously maintained architecture of his lies. But first, before anything else, she needed to make a phone call. The phone rang 3 times before a woman's voice answered, warm, slightly breathless, imbued with the kind of easy confidence Glenda recognized instantly in successful women who genuinely believed their lives were exactly as they appeared. "Hello, is this Vivian?" A pregnant pause, stretched taut like a violin string. "Yes, who's calling?" Glenda closed her eyes, steadying herself, her knuckles white against the cool marble kitchen counter. "This is Glenda Morrison. I believe you know my husband, Brian." The silence that followed stretched between them, an abyss opening, filled only by the muffled sounds from Vivian's end. In the background, Glenda could discern the faint murmur of children's voices, the domestic symphony of a family evening unfolding, a television murmuring indistinctly, dishes clinking softly, the ordinary, comforting sounds of a life that existed, with devastating precision, parallel to her own. I don't understand," Vivian finally said, her voice smaller now, uncertainty creeping in around the edges like tendrils of smoke. "I think you do," Glenda replied, her tone gentle yet utterly devoid of doubt. "And I think we need to talk." The conversation that followed, unfurling over the next hour, would later seem surreal to both women. Two strangers, discovering they'd been living in carefully constructed, identical versions of the same monstrous lie, comparing notes on a shared husband like archaeologists piecing together the fragmented remains of a forgotten, deceitful civilization. Vivian's Brian traveled for work 3 days a week. Glenda's Brian traveled 4 days a week. Their intricately woven schedules had been orchestrated with military precision, a logistical masterpiece designed to ensure the two meticulously compartmentalized worlds never, ever collided. They agreed to meet the following afternoon at a quiet, unassuming cafe in Notting Hill, neutral territory, a place where neither woman had ever shared memories of Brian's presence. Glenda spent the intervening hours in a strange, dissociative state of suspended animation, moving through her normal routine with an almost unsettling calm, while her mind, operating on a separate, higher plane, processed the overwhelming magnitude of the deception she'd uncovered. She attended her morning partner meeting at Morrison & Associates, presenting updates on their latest project, a groundbreaking sustainable housing development in Copenhagen, with the same professional competence and detached brilliance that had defined her illustrious career. Her colleagues, immersed in their own work, noticed absolutely nothing unusual. She'd always been exceptionally skilled at compartmentalization, at ruthlessly separating her emotional life from her professional responsibilities. Now, that honed ability didn't feel like a mere skill. It felt like survival training, as if she'd unknowingly been preparing for this exact, catastrophic moment her entire life. Vivian arrived at the cafe first, a punctual, elegant silhouette against the bustling street. Glenda spotted her immediately, intelligent-looking, approximately her own age, with the kind of understated, confident style that spoke volumes of success and self-possession. Glenda could see instantly why Brian had chosen her. They were remarkably similar, accomplished women who'd meticulously built substantial lives for themselves, individuals who wouldn't have been easily dismissed or manipulated by ordinary men. "You're exactly what I expected," Vivian said, her voice a complex mixture of raw sadness and bitter admiration, as Glenda approached their table. "He does have a type, doesn't he?" They ordered coffee neither truly wanted, the aroma momentarily cutting through the tension, and began the strange, painful process of comparing their parallel existences. The details were devastating in their precision, each revelation a fresh stab. Brian had given both women engagement rings from the same exclusive jeweler, proposed on moonlit bridges in different European cities, and, most cruelly, had honeymooned in Tuscany with Vivian 6 months after returning from the very same region with Glenda. "The twins were planned," Vivian said, stirring her untouched cappuccino, her voice a detached whisper. "We discussed timing, career considerations, the best spacing between children. He was so thoughtful about everything. My work schedule, the nanny situation, even which hospital had the best maternity ward." Glenda felt a wave of nausea. Emma, her beloved daughter, was supposedly unexpected. He made such a beautiful speech about how the best things in life come when you're not planning them. He uses different scripts with each of us. Vivian observed, with the clinical detachment of someone still in shock, performing an autopsy on her own life. Customized performances designed to make us feel special, chosen, utterly irreplaceable. They compared photographs on their phones, swiping through cherished memories like detectives building an intricate case. Brian at Emma's school play, wearing the same proud, doting father expression he'd sported at Marcus's football match. Brian cooking elaborate Sunday breakfast in both kitchens, using identical techniques to make fluffy pancakes for different sets of children. Brian sleeping peacefully in beds he'd chosen with 2 different women. His face relaxed with the disturbing satisfaction of someone who'd flawlessly managed a complex, duplicitous double life. 3 years, Glenda said finally, her voice hoarse. "How did he maintain this for 3 years without either of us noticing?" "Because we trusted him completely," Vivian replied, her gaze meeting Glenda's, a shared understanding passing between them. "And because he's extraordinarily good at this. This isn't amateur manipulation. This is professional-level deception." As afternoon bled into evening, their conversation shifted, slowly but inexorably, from the initial shock of discovery to cold, strategic planning. Both women, seasoned professionals in highly competitive fields, possessed the kind of incisive, analytical minds that had built successful careers. They began applying those formidable skills to their shared problem with increasing focus and grim determination. "He's been stealing from both of us," Glenda said, reviewing the financial documents she'd meticulously organized. Time, money, emotional energy, years of our lives. And he's stolen from our children, too. Emma deserves a father who's fully present, not someone managing multiple family units like a corporate portfolio. The question is what we do about it, Vivian said, her jaw tight. I assume we both want him to face consequences for this. Divorce will be complicated. Glenda noted, ever practical. Bigamy is illegal, but proving it in court will require extensive documentation. And there's the even more critical question of the children. Emma and your twins shouldn't suffer more than absolutely necessary for their father's monstrous choices. Unless, Vivian paused, a subtle, dangerous shift in her expression. What if we controlled the narrative? What if instead of letting him manage the revelation and the inevitable aftermath, we took charge of how this unfolds? Glenda felt something awakening in her chest, a pulse of energy that was not just anger, but a thrill of strategic excitement. For the first time since discovering Brian's deception, she felt the familiar, exhilarating rush of approaching a complex problem with the precise tools to solve it, elegantly and irrevocably. What exactly are you proposing? Vivian leaned forward across the small cafe table, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Brian has built his entire double life on the fundamental assumption that we, his two wives, would never ever communicate with each other. He's counting on our pride, our shame, our individual devastation to keep us separated and, crucially, manageable. But we're not separated anymore. Exactly, Glenda finished, her architect's mind already visualizing the systematic destruction of Brian's carefully balanced deception. And we're certainly not manageable either. We're two highly intelligent, professionally successful women who've just discovered we've been systematically, clinically deceived. If we work together instead of against each other, we can dismantle his entire rotten structure more efficiently than he could ever hope to rebuild it. He's supposed to be at my house tonight, Vivian said, her eyes glinting with a newfound resolve. Thursday through Sunday, remember? But what if, when he arrives, he finds more than he bargained for? You want to confront him together? Glenda asked, a slow smile spreading across her face. I want to control the situation completely. No more of his well-rehearsed scripts, his prepared explanations, his insidious ability to manipulate each of us separately. Just Brian Morrison facing the two women whose lives he's stolen, with absolutely nowhere to run and no lies left to tell. Glenda felt her professional instincts engage fully for the first time since she'd found the photographs. This wasn't just about emotional satisfaction, a visceral revenge. It was about strategic superiority, about ensuring Brian couldn't continue his elaborate deception, or worse, start fresh with yet another unsuspecting victim. What about the children? Glenda asked, the practical concerns still paramount. My neighbor is taking Marcus and Sophie for the night, Vivian replied, a touch of grim amusement in her voice. They think it's a sleepover treat. Emma's still at her friend's house through tomorrow, right? Yes, Glenda confirmed, checking her watch. He should arrive at your house around 8, expecting his usual Thursday night routine. Instead, Vivian concluded, her voice carrying a cold, steely satisfaction that Glenda recognized in herself, a kindred spirit of calculated fury. He'll find both of his wives waiting for him. And Glenda? Vivian's eyes held hers. We're not going to let him explain his way out of this. We're going to watch him realize that his perfect system has completely, irrevocably collapsed. They exchanged phone numbers and addresses with the brisk, efficient air of business partners finalizing a multi-million-dollar deal. As Glenda walked back to her car, the cold London air biting at her cheeks, she felt something she hadn't expected. Not just the burning vindication, but a genuine, profound respect for Vivian. Brian had indeed chosen well. Both of his wives possessed the fierce intelligence and indomitable strength to not just survive his egregious betrayal, but to weaponize it, to turn it into his ultimate catastrophic downfall. Tonight, Brian Morrison would discover that his greatest mistake wasn't maintaining two families for 3 years. It was catastrophically underestimating the women he'd chosen to deceive. The Victorian house in Hampstead looked exactly like the kind of home Glenda might have chosen herself. elegant without being ostentatious, nestled within mature gardens that spoke of careful attention and long-term planning. As she parked her sleek black car beside Vivian's, Glenda felt the surreal, almost dreamlike weight of entering a space that was simultaneously foreign and intimately, terrifyingly familiar. This was where Brian read bedtime stories, discussed school events, made weekend plans with children who believed, with unquestioning innocence, that he belonged exclusively to them. Vivian opened the front door before Glenda could even knock, her expression composed, her gaze direct. She'd changed from their cafe meeting, trading her casual dress for something more commanding. Dark tailored trousers and a crisp white shirt, suggesting she was prepared for serious business rather than emotional breakdown. "He texted 20 minutes ago," Vivian said without preamble, her voice low and steady. "Running slightly late. Should be here by 8:15. The interior of the house was a vibrant, living museum of Brian's systematic deception. Family photographs lined the hallway, beach vacations, exuberant birthday parties, cozy Christmas mornings, all featuring the version of Brian that belonged to this address. Glenda recognized his expressions, his particular way of holding a child, even specific shirts he'd worn to similar events with Emma, chillingly replicated in this alternate reality. "Coffee?" Vivian asked, leading her towards the warm glow of the kitchen. I think better when my hands are occupied." The kitchen was large, sunlit, and lived in, scattered with the joyful detritus of family life. Children's artwork, rendered in crayon and glitter, was magnetized to the refrigerator door. Homework assignments, annotated in a familiar hand, were stacked neatly on the counter. A calendar, prominently displayed, was filled with a complex web of appointments and activities that meticulously demonstrated the logistical ballet of raising twins while maintaining a demanding career. "What do you do?" Glenda asked, accepting a cup of coffee she didn't want, the warmth radiating through the ceramic. "Investment banking," Vivian replied, her voice crisp. "Mergers and acquisitions, primarily European markets." "And you?" "Architecture," Glenda responded, a faint, grim smile touching her lips. "Commercial and residential, mostly sustainable development projects." They shared another, more pronounced grim smile at the uncomfortable recognition of their parallel professional success. Brian had indeed chosen a very specific type, ambitious, fiercely intelligent, financially independent women who had built substantial, self-sufficient lives that could, crucially, accommodate his elaborate, deceitful scheduling requirements. "I've been thinking about his psychology," Vivian said, settling into a chair across from Glenda at the kitchen island, a faint clinking of ice in her water glass. "This level of systematic deception requires enormous emotional compartmentalization. He's essentially living as two completely different people, switching between identities with the same ease most people change clothes. The question is whether he's a sociopath, or just an extraordinarily selfish man who got in too deep to stop," Glenda replied, her voice edged with a cold fury. "Either way, he spent 3 years treating both of us like supporting characters in his elaborate, self-serving fantasy. And our children as props." The mention of their children brought a fresh, searing wave of anger. Emma's unwavering trust in her father, her boundless excitement when he returned from his supposed business trips, her innocent pride in showing him school projects and athletic achievements, all of it, every precious moment, had been shared, duplicated, diminished, with other children who believed they had equal claim to Brian's attention and love. At exactly 8:14 p.m., headlights swept across the front windows, momentarily illuminating the quiet street. Vivian and Glenda exchanged a look, a silent, potent communication that contained months of strategy compressed into a single, electrifying moment of understanding. "Remember," Vivian said quietly, her voice a steel whisper, "we control this conversation. No matter what he says, how he tries to explain or manipulate, we have the evidence and we have each other." Brian's key turned in the front lock with a familiar click, and his voice, warm with the casual affection of a man returning home to his family, carried down the hallway. "Viv, sorry I'm late. The client meeting ran longer than—" He appeared in the kitchen doorway, framed against the soft glow of the hall light, and stopped abruptly, as if he'd walked into an invisible, insurmountable wall. For the first time in the 15 years Glenda had known him, Brian Morrison looked utterly, completely unprepared for the situation unfolding before him. "Hello, Brian," Glenda said, her voice unervingly calm, a cool blade slicing through the domestic air. "Glenda." His face went through a rapid-fire succession of expressions. Confusion, then dawning recognition, a flicker of frantic calculation, and finally, the terrible, gut-wrenching understanding of someone whose perfect, meticulously constructed system had suddenly, irrevocably collapsed. "Glenda." Her name came out as a question, as if he couldn't quite believe she was real, a phantom conjured from his deepest fears. "What? How?" "Sit down, Brian," Vivian said, her voice carrying the same authoritative tone she probably used to command boardrooms, brooking no argument. "We have several things to discuss." Brian remained frozen in the doorway, his mind visibly struggling to process the impossible collision of his two separate worlds, now irrevocably fused in Vivian's warm, lived-in kitchen. Glenda could see him, literally, searching for an explanation, a plausible story, any narrative that might somehow contain this disaster, but his usual confident demeanor had evaporated entirely, leaving behind only a pale, stunned shell. "I can explain." "No." Glenda's voice, sharp and decisive, cut through his pathetic attempt at control. "You've explained enough, Brian. 3 years of explanations, actually. Business trips, client meetings, urgent work emergencies. All perfectly crafted explanations designed to help us unknowingly share a husband." Unknowingly being the operative word, Vivian added, her voice equally cutting. "Until yesterday, when your wife called to introduce herself." Brian finally moved, stumbling towards the kitchen table like a man walking through deep, treacherous water. He sat down heavily, his face ashen, his hands shaking slightly as the full, crushing magnitude of his exposure became terrifyingly clear. "The children are safely away from this conversation," Vivian said firmly, her gaze unwavering. "Unlike you, Brian, we've prioritized their well-being over our own immediate emotional needs." "How long have you known?" Brian asked, his voice barely a whisper, looking between them with something that might have been professional curiosity if the circumstances hadn't been so profoundly different. "Long enough to do our research," Glenda replied, her tone chillingly precise. She pulled out her phone, its screen a glowing rectangle in the dim kitchen, and began scrolling through the meticulously compiled evidence. "Shall we start with the financial fraud? 2 mortgages, 2 separate insurance policies, 2 complete sets of family accounts, all managed with mathematical precision to ensure neither household interfered with the other. Or perhaps the identity theft," Vivian continued, picking up seamlessly. "Using the same social security number, the same legal name, the same professional credentials to build 2 separate lives with 2 different women. Actually," Glenda interjected, her voice growing colder, sharper. "Let's discuss the children. Emma has spent the last 3 years believing her father travels for work 4 days a week, accepting his absence because she trusts him completely, absolutely. Meanwhile, Marcus and Sophie believe their father works in London but comes home every Thursday like clockwork. You've stolen time from all 3 of them, Brian. Precious, irreplaceable time they will never get back." Brian's desperate attempt to speak, to stammer out some semblance of defense, was cut off by Vivian's continuation of their carefully orchestrated presentation. "We've had almost 24 hours to process this situation, Brian," Vivian said, her eyes fixed on him. 24 hours to move beyond initial shock and betrayal into strategic planning. "Do you know what we've discovered?" Brian shook his head mutely, his gaze vacant. "We like each other," Glenda said simply, the words hanging in the air like a pronouncement. "Despite being married to the same man, despite discovering our entire lives have been elaborate lies, we found we have enormous respect for each other's intelligence, professional success, and parenting skills. Which creates an interesting situation," Vivian continued, a predatory glint in her eyes. "Because while you've spent 3 years managing us separately, assuming we'd never communicate, never compare notes, never join forces, We've spent one afternoon becoming allies. Powerful allies. What do you want? Brian finally managed to ask, his voice hoarse, broken. Glenda and Vivian exchanged another look, this one containing the cold, potent satisfaction of chess players who had just achieved a flawless checkmate. First, Glenda said, her voice radiating quiet authority, you're going to listen while we explain exactly how this is going to work from now on. No interruptions, no explanations, no attempts to manipulate or negotiate. You've lost the right to control any part of this situation, Brian. Second, Vivian continued, her voice equally unyielding. You're going to understand that your comfortable, duplicitous double life is over. Permanently, irrevocably. You will never again have the luxury of managing separate families like a corporate portfolio. Oh, and third, Glenda finished, her voice carrying the quiet, unwavering power of someone who had just discovered her own formidable strength. You're going to learn what it truly feels like when the women you've so catastrophically underestimated take complete, absolute control of your carefully constructed world. Brian sat in his chair, slumped and defeated, like a man attending his own funeral, finally understanding that his greatest mistake hadn't been maintaining two families for 3 years. It had been a cruel twist of fate, or perhaps a moment of cosmic irony, that Brian's carefully constructed house of cards had not fallen because of a random gust, but by the deliberate, precise efforts of the two women he had underestimated the most. He had chosen, or perhaps, in his immense hubris, allowed himself to be discovered by two individuals whose intelligence, once misdirected by his charm, now served as an unstoppable force against him. The conversation that would irrevocably shatter their interwoven lives, and his, had just begun, unspooling not in a dramatic courtroom, but in the sterile, brightly lit arena of Vivian's kitchen. The systematic demolition of Brian's elaborately false existence took exactly 47 minutes. Glenda, her gaze fixed on the digital clock on Vivian's sleek, stainless steel stove, registered each passing second with chilling clarity. They worked with the detached precision of highly skilled professionals dismantling a faulty structure, each document, each damning piece of evidence, a well-placed charge in the controlled implosion of 3 years of meticulously woven deceit. Brian, initially defiant, then bewildered, had attempted to offer explanations precisely 3 times. Each feeble attempt, each stammered denial, died in his throat as the crushing weight of their evidence rendered his words utterly meaningless. His wives, no, his former wives, he realized with a sickening lurch, had moved light years beyond the emotional turmoil where his carefully crafted lies held any sway. They presented him with an undeniable dossier, irrefutable financial statements, meticulously cross-referenced travel logs, official marriage certificates from 2 separate counties, and a timeline of overlapping commitments so granular and comprehensive that any attempt at denial was not merely futile, but pathetically, transparently absurd. Vivian, ever the pragmatist, had laid out the legal ramifications with the dispassionate clarity of a seasoned prosecutor. Documents fanned across the polished granite countertop like exhibits for a jury. The legal situation is straightforward, Brian, she'd stated, her voice devoid of any emotion that might betray the raw pain beneath. Bigamy is a felony. Identity fraud is a felony. And financial fraud, involving 2 separate mortgages, multiple insurance policies, and overlapping joint accounts, is also a felony. You are, quite simply, looking at significant prison time. Then, Glenda, her earlier fury now channeled into a startlingly calm, almost businesslike resolve, leaned forward. However, she interjected, her tone measured, like a seasoned negotiator presenting an unexpected alternative. We're less interested in destroying you utterly, Brian, and far more invested in moving forward efficiently. We both have children to consider, and lengthy, messy criminal proceedings wouldn't serve anyone's best interests. Their proposal, honed by shared outrage and a fierce protective instinct for their children, was a model of elegant simplicity. Brian would, effective immediately, sever all communication with both families, save for strictly supervised visits with his children, carefully coordinated and observed. He would systematically liquidate every shared asset, ensuring an equitable division of funds between the 2 households he had so cruelly defrauded. He would then embark on extensive, court-mandated therapy, a journey aimed at unraveling the tangled psychological dysfunction that had fueled 3 years of calculated, systematic deception. And, a clause underscored with unyielding resolve, he would never again initiate contact with either woman for any purpose beyond the precise parameters of child custody. All communication strictly funneled through their respective legal representatives. "You're ending both marriages?" Brian's voice, when he finally spoke, was a barely audible rasp, hollowed by the sudden, brutal realization that the comfortable, perfectly compartmentalized existence he had so meticulously constructed was not merely crumbling, but being systematically, irrevocably dismantled. "You ended both marriages 3 years ago, Brian?" Glenda responded, her tone cutting clean and sharp, without a flicker of remorse. "We're simply making it official now, giving it the dignity of an ending it never earned." 3 weeks later, the air in Glenda's living room felt lighter, almost breathable. She stood in the redesigned space, a quiet marvel blooming in her chest at the astonishing speed with which an environment could shed its old skin once the suffocating elements that no longer served its true purpose were ruthlessly excised. The photographs, once ubiquitous, framing Brian's smiling, deceitful face, had vanished. Their absence was filled by a vibrant, impressionistic painting Emma had created during their recent, joy-filled mother-daughter weekend in Paris. A canvas bursting with vivid colors and carefree energy. The heavy, formal furniture, once arranged to create a sense of imposing order, had been reconfigured, opened up, allowing light to flood in and facilitating an effortless flow between the kitchen and the now inviting sitting areas. The oppressive, invisible weight of Brian's elaborate deception, which had permeated every corner of her home and her life, had not just been lifted. It had been replaced. In its stead, Glenda found something she hadn't dared to expect. A shimmering, genuine excitement for the future. A clear space now existing where suffocating doubt had once been. Her phone rang, startling her slightly, and Vivian's name, accompanied by a candid photo from their second, surprisingly easy coffee meeting, flashed across the screen. Both women were captured mid-laugh, radiating the quiet satisfaction of individuals who had not only survived a complex crisis but had navigated it with formidable skill. "How did Emma handle the school conference?" Vivian asked without preamble, their easy familiarity now requiring no polite lead-in. "Better than expected, actually," Glenda replied, a smile touching her lips. "Her teacher says she's actually more focused, more engaged, since the custody arrangement started. Less anxiety about disappointing a father who was never fully present, I suppose. And it's not just Emma. Marcus and Sophie are showing similar improvements. It's truly remarkable how quickly children adapt, how they blossom. Once the adults in their lives stop the exhausting charade of pretending everything is normal. Their friendship had developed with the same breathtaking intensity that had characterized their dismantling of Brian's deception. Two women, brought together by shared betrayal, who discovered they possessed complementary strengths, an uncanny resonance in their values, and a fierce, shared determination, found themselves building something neither had anticipated. It was a genuine partnership, forged in the crucible of adversity, in the audacious act of rebuilding their lives from the ground up. "Are you free for dinner Thursday?" Glenda asked, her voice tinged with the familiar anticipation of their collaborations. "I want to discuss the Barcelona project with you." 6 months earlier, Morrison and Associates, Glenda's architectural firm, had unexpectedly won a coveted contract to design a groundbreaking sustainable housing development in Barcelona's vibrant example district. The project was monumental, requiring extensive collaboration with shrewd financial analysts to ensure the development remained not just profitable, but a beacon of economic viability while simultaneously meeting ambitious, cutting-edge environmental standards. Glenda had initially planned to hire outside consultants, a standard practice, but Vivian's unparalleled expertise in European markets and her innovative approach to sustainable investment strategies made her the immediate, undeniable choice. "Business dinner or friend dinner?" Vivian asked, a playful amusement in her tone. "Both, ideally," Glenda chuckled. "The project desperately needs your analytical skills, of course, But I also want to celebrate Emma's acceptance to that advanced mathematics program. She's ecstatic. Excellent. And I have news about the foundation. They had established the Morrison Chin Foundation for Financial Education a mere 3 months after Brian's exposure, a testament to their swift action and shared purpose. Using their combined expertise, they created a powerful platform to empower women to recognize and skillfully avoid financial manipulation in relationships. The foundation quickly became a vital resource, providing illuminating workshops, comprehensive resource guides, and confidential, one-on-one counseling for women who had discovered economic deception chillingly similar to what they themselves had experienced. The first workshop series is completely booked, Vivian continued, her voice alight with satisfaction. 25 women, ranging from recent graduates navigating their first serious relationships to seasoned professionals in their 50s, all dealing with various, often insidious, forms of financial betrayal or manipulation. The demand is extraordinary. Because the problem is far more common than most people realize, Glenda replied, settling into the plush armchair she'd purposefully repositioned to overlook the serene expanse of Hyde Park. The soft autumn light filtered through the window, illuminating the quiet domesticity that now felt so profoundly earned. Women are so often taught to trust blindly in relationships, to cede control, while men are frequently, almost inherently, taught to protect and expand their financial interests. It creates the perfect, fertile conditions for the kind of systematic deception we experienced. The Barcelona project could serve as a powerful case study for the foundation. Then, Vivian suggested, her mind already connecting disparate threads, demonstrating how women can not only collaborate professionally with incredible synergy, but also rebuild their personal lives with resilience and grace. We are living proof, Glenda, that betrayal doesn't have to destroy your capacity for trust. It can, in fact, teach you to trust more intelligently, more discerningly. Just then, Emma appeared in the living room doorway, her backpack slung casually over one shoulder, a confident, almost radiant expression on her face. The unmistakable look of a child whose world had, remarkably, become far more stable, more transparent, since her parents' divorce. At 10 years old, she possessed a truly remarkable ability to adapt to new circumstances, an uncanny resilience that allowed her to embrace change without dwelling on what she had lost. "Mom," she began, her voice brimming with excitement. "Can Vivian and the twins come to my science fair presentation next Friday? I'm demonstrating sustainable architecture principles using your Copenhagen project as a model. I think Marcus would really get a kick out of the energy efficiency displays." "That sounds absolutely perfect, sweetheart," Glenda said, feeling a wave of warmth spread through her. A warmth that had nothing to do with mere maternal pride and everything to do with watching her daughter build relationships based on genuine connection, on shared interests and mutual respect, rather than the fragile, artificial family structure Brian had so cunningly maintained. After Emma left for school, a renewed sense of purpose settled over Glenda as she returned to her architectural plans for the Barcelona development. The project had quickly come to represent everything she had learned about building structures that could withstand unexpected stresses while maintaining their essential, fundamental integrity. Like her newly reconstructed life, these buildings would be designed to adapt, to strengthen, to evolve, rather than simply to endure. Her laptop displayed a glowing email from the Copenhagen project managers, praising the innovative sustainability features that had not only met, but significantly exceeded all projected performance metrics. The development had already won 3 prestigious international awards and generated inquiries from cities across Europe, all keenly interested in replicating the groundbreaking model. Professional success had always been important to Glenda, a source of quiet satisfaction, but now it felt profoundly different. It wasn't compensation for personal disappointment. It was the natural, unburdened expression of someone whose energy was no longer being diverted, systematically siphoned off, into the exhausting, soul-crushing effort of managing a fundamentally dishonest relationship. She opened her design software, the familiar interface a welcome sight, and began meticulously refining the Barcelona plans, seamlessly incorporating suggestions from Vivian's incisive financial analysis while steadfastly maintaining the aesthetic vision that had won them the contract. Working with someone whose intelligence she so deeply respected, whose integrity she had tested under the most extreme, unimaginable circumstances, felt like the kind of collaboration she had always yearned for but had tragically never experienced during her marriage to Brian. The phone rang again, startling her from her focused concentration. This time, the number was unfamiliar. "Glenda Morrison, this is Sarah Chun from Architectural Digest." A clear, professional voice stated. "We're planning a feature on innovative sustainable developments, and your Copenhagen project has been nominated for our International Excellence Award. We'd love to schedule an interview." The interview, which unfolded over the next 30 minutes, was expansive, covering everything from her deeply held design philosophy to the intricate construction challenges they had overcome, and the profound social impact of sustainable architecture on burgeoning urban communities. When the journalist, Sarah Chun, asked about her inspiration for the Copenhagen project, Glenda found herself talking, with an unexpected clarity, about the paramount importance of building structures that could adapt gracefully to changing needs without ever compromising their fundamental strength. "It sounds like you're describing resilience as an architectural principle," Sarah Chun observed thoughtfully. "Resilience and transformation," Glenda agreed, a profound sense of recognition washing over her. The very best structures aren't just designed to withstand stress. They're designed to become stronger, more integrated, through the continuous process of adaptation. After the interview, Glenda realized, with a quiet jolt, that she had been describing far more than just architecture. She had been articulating, with astonishing precision, the very philosophy that had guided her through the turbulent past 6 months. The profound understanding that betrayal didn't have to mean utter destruction. It could, instead, be a catalyst for reconstruction, a chance to rebuild according to better, truer principles. Her evening plans, simple and deeply satisfying, included reviewing Emma's homework, meticulously preparing for Thursday's business dinner with Vivian, and finalizing her presentation for the Foundation's next board meeting. These were ordinary activities, yes, but they felt profoundly extraordinary precisely because they belonged entirely to her, demanding no constant, unconscious effort to accommodate someone else's hidden agenda, no quiet erosion of her own identity. As London's soft, melancholic autumn light faded outside her windows, casting long shadows across her now peaceful living room, Glenda felt something she had never, not once, experienced during her long marriage. She felt a complete, unburdened ownership of her own life. It wasn't just financial independence or hard-won professional success. It was the deep, resonant satisfaction of someone whose precious energy was no longer being stolen, day by day, by elaborate, soul-crushing deceptions. Brian had, inadvertently, taught her an invaluable lesson, though certainly not the one he had intended. He had shown her, in stark, undeniable relief, the profound difference between trusting blindly and trusting intelligently. Between building your entire life around someone else's fleeting presence and building a life so intrinsically strong that it could incorporate partnership without ever requiring it for its fundamental solidity. Tomorrow would undoubtedly bring new challenges, new opportunities, new chances to demonstrate that the woman who had emerged from Brian's betrayal was not just surviving, but thriving in ways she had never dared to imagine possible. The best revenge, she had discovered, wasn't destruction of the person who harmed you. It was unequivocally reconstruction, building something so utterly superior that the original, by comparison, seemed like a poor, pathetic imitation. 1 year later, the late afternoon sun, a painter's palette of fiery oranges and deep purples, streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Glenda's newly redesigned Barcelona office. She stood there, watching the sun dip below the horizon, illuminating Anton Gaudí's architectural masterpieces scattered across the city's iconic skyline like jewels. The Morrison Chun Sustainable Development Center now occupied 2 luminous floors of a beautifully renovated modernist building and example, serving as both the bustling headquarters for their rapidly expanding architectural firm and the vibrant European office of their increasingly influential financial education foundation. The Barcelona housing project, their flagship initiative, had exceeded every projected benchmark with breathtaking success. The meticulously designed buildings integrated seamlessly into the historic neighborhood, a testament to thoughtful urban planning, while achieving an unprecedented net-zero energy consumption and, crucially, providing beautiful, affordable housing for families previously priced out of the city center. More importantly, The dynamic collaboration between Glenda's visionary architectural designs and Vivian's incisive financial expertise had created an entirely new model for sustainable development, a blueprint that cities across 3 continents were now clamoring to replicate. "The Rome proposal is approved," Vivian announced, striding into the office with an uncorked bottle of champagne and the kind of confident, radiant smile that had become so utterly familiar, so deeply reassuring, over the months of their unparalleled partnership. "The Italian government wants us to design an entire district using our Barcelona model. And the foundation, the Milan Workshop Series, is completely booked through next spring. We've received funding requests from organizations in 12 different countries, all wanting to establish similar programs for women dealing with financial manipulation in relationships." They shared the champagne in comfortable, companionable silence, a moment of profound understanding passing between them. 2 women who had discovered that the worst betrayal of their lives, the most agonizing personal devastation, had, paradoxically, led to the most honest, deeply rooted professional partnership either had ever experienced. Their business relationship had evolved naturally, organically, from their shared crisis, a logical progression of their combined strengths. But their friendship had developed into something neither had anticipated, a bond forged in fire. Complete, unshakable trust, earned through the most extreme and trying circumstances. Emma appeared in the doorway then, speaking rapid, fluent Catalan with Vivian's twins, Marcus and Sophie, their voices a cheerful cascade as they excitedly discussed weekend plans that involved exploring Barcelona's sun-drenched beaches and diligently practicing the Spanish they'd all been learning together. The children, astonishingly resilient, had adapted to their unconventional, expanded family structure with a grace and ease that constantly amazed both women. "Mom," Emma asked, her eyes bright, "can we show Marcus and Sophie the Sagrada Familia tomorrow? I want to explain how Gaudi's structural innovations influenced your contemporary designs." At 11, Emma had developed a sophisticated understanding of architecture that not only impressed Glenda's professional colleagues but also eloquently demonstrated the profound benefits of having a fully present parent, a mother whose attention wasn't cruelly divided between secret families, but wholly devoted to her. The girl who had once, unconsciously, competed for her father's fractured attention had blossomed into someone utterly confident in her own burgeoning interests and remarkable abilities. "Of course, darling," Glenda replied, her heart swelling with affection. "But remember, we're meeting Vivian's parents for lunch afterward." The integration of their families had happened gradually, almost imperceptibly, without the forced cheerfulness or the underlying tension that had characterized so many holiday gatherings during Brian's systematic deception. Vivian's parents had embraced Emma with the overflowing enthusiasm of grandparents gaining an unexpected, beloved grandchild, while Emma had found in Marcus and Sophie the siblings she'd always secretly wanted but had never dared to ask for. After the children, their voices echoing with joyful anticipation, left to explore the building's verdant rooftop garden, Glenda and Vivian settled into the conversation that had become their cherished evening ritual, reviewing the day's profound successes while meticulously planning tomorrow's intricate challenges. "I heard from Brian's attorney," Vivian said casually, pouring them each another glass of champagne. Her tone was light, almost detached, a testament to how utterly irrelevant Brian had become to their emotional landscape. "He's completed his court-mandated therapy and wants to request additional visitation time with the children." "And what did Dr. Harrison say in his evaluation?" Glenda inquired, a familiar, almost automatic mixture of disappointment and relief stirring within her. Disappointment that the man she'd once loved appeared utterly incapable of genuine introspection or change, and profound relief that her life, her happiness, no longer depended on his capacity for honesty or growth. "He demonstrates a superficial understanding of the harm he caused, apparently, but shows limited evidence of actual emotional growth," Vivian recounted, a wry smile playing on her lips. "His therapist believes he's learned to say the right things rather than genuinely transforming his approach to relationships and responsibility. Typical Brian, in other words. The children seem perfectly content with the current arrangement, don't they?" Glenda observed. "More than content, Glenda. They're thriving," Vivian emphasized. Emma's rock-solid confidence, Marcus's accelerated academic improvement, Sophie's remarkable artistic development. All of it truly accelerated once they stopped unconsciously competing for attention from someone who was never, truly, fully present. The custody arrangement, a marvel of strategic design, had been meticulously crafted to prioritize the children's stability and well-being above Brian's fleeting preferences. Supervised visits, strictly twice monthly, were scheduled around the children's activities and school calendar, rather than his convenience, with explicit, unbreachable boundaries about introducing new romantic relationships or making promises he demonstrably couldn't keep. "He's dating again, you know," Vivian mentioned, her voice still remarkably devoid of malice. "Someone from his new job, according to the private investigator we retained to monitor his compliance with the custody terms." "I hope she's smarter than we were," Glenda murmured, a flicker of genuine concern in her eyes for the unknown woman. "She is," Vivian confirmed, a knowing smirk on her face. "I hired the same investigator to do a background check, just to be sure. Dr. Amanda Foster, pediatric surgeon at St. Mary's Hospital, divorced, with 2 teenage children of her own. She discovered Brian's history during their second date and, I'm pleased to report, ended the relationship immediately. They shared a laugh then, a sound devoid of bitterness or malice, containing only the quiet satisfaction of 2 women who had not only learned to fiercely protect themselves but had, in doing so, indirectly protected another woman from repeating their painful experience. The evening light, now a soft, ethereal glow, streamed through their office windows, illuminating architectural plans scattered across Glenda's drafting table. These were designs for ambitious affordable housing projects in Rome, Copenhagen, and Sao Paulo, all incorporating the groundbreaking sustainable principles and the deeply community-centered approach that had become her signature, globally recognized style. "Do you ever regret it?" Vivian asked, her voice soft, contemplative, as she gestured vaguely at the plans. "The marriage, the years we spent believing his lies, the time we irrevocably lost to his deception?" Glenda considered the question for a long moment, her gaze drifting out to the Barcelona skyline, now twinkling with myriad lights. The city, with its ancient stones and modernist flourishes, had taught her something profoundly important about reconstruction, that the most beautiful, enduring structures often arose not from untouched perfection, but from the deliberate, careful dismantling of something that had served its purpose but could no longer contain the vibrant, insistent life growing within it. "I regret the deception, yes," she said finally, her voice firm, clear. "I regret the time Emma lost with a father who was never truly present, never truly honest. I regret that we both wasted years of our emotional energy, our trust, our very selves, on someone utterly incapable of genuine partnership. But," she paused, taking a slow, fortifying breath, "I don't regret the outcome. Brian's betrayal, as devastating as it was, forced me to rebuild my life according to principles I'd never articulated before. Complete honesty, transparent communication, shared responsibility, mutual respect based on demonstrated behavior rather than promised intentions. And it led us to each other. This deep professional partnership, this genuine friendship, this shared commitment to helping other women avoid what we experienced. None of that, Vivian, absolutely none of that, would have existed if Brian had been the husband we thought he was." Vivian nodded thoughtfully, her eyes reflecting the city lights. "He taught us to trust intelligently rather than blindly, didn't he? To verify rather than assume. To build relationships that could withstand scrutiny rather than requiring secrecy and careful compartmentalization." Emma's clear, joyful laughter echoed from the rooftop garden, accompanied by the twins' enthusiastic voices as they practiced Spanish phrases that would help them navigate tomorrow's cultural exploration. Their easy camaraderie, their intertwined lives, eloquently demonstrated something both women had learned with profound certainty: that family could be created through conscious choice and unwavering commitment, rather than just biological connection or legal obligation. "The Milan Foundation office is opening next month," Vivian said, returning to their business planning with characteristic efficiency. "We'll need to hire local staff who understand both Italian financial regulations and the nuanced cultural context of family-related financial abuse. I've been corresponding with Dr. Elena Rossi at the University of Milan." Her groundbreaking research on economic manipulation in European relationships would make her an excellent, indispensable director for the Italian program. Their foundation had evolved far beyond its original, vital focus on basic financial education, growing organically to encompass comprehensive support for women rebuilding their lives after discovering systematic deception. Workshops now covered everything from understanding legal rights to navigating emotional recovery to fostering professional development, all meticulously designed by women who intimately understood the complex, often arduous, process of transformation that inevitably followed betrayal. The waiting list for our residential workshops is approaching 6 months. Vivian continued, her voice tinged with both satisfaction and a sober awareness of the pervasive need. Women are flying in from across Europe and North America to participate in programs created by the two women who, in a magnificent act of defiance, turned their husband's betrayal into a blueprint for reconstruction. Speaking of blueprints, Glenda said, spreading the Rome housing project plans across her desk, the intricate drawings catching the last vestiges of twilight. The Italian government wants us to incorporate foundation services directly into the residential development. Community centers that provide both childcare and financial education workshops. Architectural designs that deliberately facilitate mutual support networks among residents. Architecture as social intervention, essentially. Exactly, Vivian affirmed, her eyes sparkling with shared vision. Building communities that make isolation and manipulation more difficult, while actively encouraging transparency and mutual support at every level. As night settled, a velvety cloak over Barcelona, Glenda felt the deep, resonant satisfaction of someone whose life now aligned completely, seamlessly, with her values and ambitions. The woman who had discovered her husband's double life a mere 18 months earlier would barely recognize the person she'd become. Someone whose energy belonged entirely to herself, and to the people she'd consciously chosen to include in her reconstructed life. Her phone buzzed, a soft vibration on the polished wood. It was a text from Emma. *Mom. Can we move to Barcelona permanently? I love our life here. And Marcus says the mathematics program at the international school is extraordinary. Glenda showed the message to Vivian, who smiled with the warmth of someone whose own children had expressed strikingly similar sentiments about their expanded, wonderfully unconventional family structure. What do you think? Vivian asked, her gaze steady, expectant. I think, Glenda replied, looking out at the glittering tapestry of the city that had so generously welcomed their ambitious reconstruction project, that the best decisions are the ones that feel like natural evolution rather than dramatic change. Barcelona it is then. And as they gathered their work materials, the hum of professional accomplishment still lingering in the air, and prepared to join the children for dinner at their favorite example restaurant, Glenda reflected once more on the most profound lesson that had emerged, like a phoenix, from Brian's betrayal. It was that the strongest structures, whether buildings or lives, weren't those that remained stubbornly unchanged, but those designed to adapt, to strengthen, to soar through the arduous yet ultimately empowering process of reconstruction. Brian had stolen 3 years of her life, yes, but those stolen years had, in their own twisted way, led to discoveries that wouldn't have been possible within the comfortable, deceptive confines of his lies. She'd learned to trust herself completely without reservation, to build partnerships based on demonstrated integrity rather than shallow, promised devotion, and to create a life so profoundly fulfilling that his absence felt not like a loss, but like an exhilarating liberation. The woman who'd once feared being alone had discovered she'd never been stronger than when she stopped depending on someone else's presence for her sense of completeness. And the woman who'd once trusted blindly had learned that the most powerful, enduring trust was the kind earned through crisis, tested through adversity, and strengthened through shared commitment to principles far larger than individual convenience. Brian Morrison had, inadvertently, given her the greatest gift possible, though he'd never intended it. The unparalleled opportunity to rebuild her life according to her own bold, unconstrained vision of what partnership, parenthood, and professional success could truly look like when they weren't stifled or warped by deception. She'd never thank him for it, of course, but she'd never again underestimate her own astonishing capacity to transform betrayal into the very foundation for something truly extraordinary. The best revenge, she'd discovered, wasn't destruction of the person who'd harmed you. It was, simply, the magnificent construction of a life so much better than what you'd lost that his absence became the essential prerequisite for your greatest achievements. As Barcelona sparkled below their office windows, a city reborn beneath a sky full of stars, Glenda Morrison understood, with a clarity that resonated deep in her bones, that she'd never been happier, never been more authentically herself, in her entire life. The red flags Glenda had once ignored now stood out in devastating, almost blinding clarity. Brian's insistent demand on managing all financial accounts separately, his subtle but persistent reluctance to introduce her to certain professional colleagues, his uncanny ability to disappear for days on end without detailed or convincing explanations, and, perhaps most insidious of all, his subtle, almost imperceptible discouragement of her burgeoning independence. She'd tragically mistaken his control for protection, his guarded secrecy for a need for privacy, his calculated manipulation for unwavering devotion. Now, she saw everything with an unblinking, crystalline clarity. No woman, she knew with absolute certainty, should ever have to compete unknowingly for her partner's attention, share her life with someone whose loyalty was divided and insincere, or painstakingly rebuild her entire identity after discovering it was built on a foundation of systematic, elaborate lies. The greatest lesson wasn't just about recognizing deception in others, but about trusting her own instincts when something, deep down, felt profoundly wrong, even and perhaps especially, if she couldn't yet articulate precisely why.